So, what are humans afraid of? The required readings: Terror Management and Aggression. Evidence that mortality salience motivates aggression against worldview threatening others, by McGregor et al. The question for the discussion is this: based on the idea that we know death exists and is inevitable, are our acts unconsciously evil or simply a means for survival at a most primitive aspect? Here we have a picture of a drive-through fast food, and then, of course, knowing what comes next. A slow death, possibly? Really cute cartoon. Terror management, one of the big theories, is the idea that humans are similar to other animals, sharing a common heritage, with a predisposition for self-preservation or continued existence. Humans, however, are different from every other species in that we have a unique cognitive ability, as they describe in the journal. This unique cognitive ability makes them aware of their own existence and that the existence may come to an end. The human drive in that case is to stay alive at any means, which can create terror. According to the theory, the terror is managed by two things: personalized version of cultural worldview, which gives sense of permanence, order, and meaning to attain a sense of personal value. The next driver is self-esteem, or the belief that one is living up to those standards and values provided by the cultural worldview. The next important key topic: mortality salience. As my good old friend Wikipedia says, mortality salience is the awareness by an individual that his or her death is inevitable, which is causal for anxiety, only to be buffered by our cultural worldview and sense of self-esteem. There is huge conflict. Humans must face the primal instinct of avoiding death, but the idea of avoiding death is, of course, futile. So, what relation do both of these actually have? Well, when mortality salience is evident, it is right to say that while humans spend all this time avoiding death, that it is almost like a fear we have that at one time we will come to an end. People tend to respond favorably to those who share similar ideas, versus those who do not. So in the case of terror management, so in this case, if terror management can play a role in aggression, then who's to say that it doesn't also play a role in the aggression against the person who threatens one's cultural worldview in mortality salience theory? Terror management can happen in response to mortality salience and vice versa, or so the idea goes, where this connection seems to be experiential or primitive rather than rational. So, of course, we can't forget aggression. It plays a huge role in reactions due to terror management theory and mortality salience theory. But how can we measure aggression in response from terror management and mortality salience? Why not shock people? It's the best measure that's out there. The amount of intensity of electrical shock that a participant will administer to another says a lot. However, the issue lies in ethical standards, and the intensity of shock doesn't just rely on hurting them. There are so many other factors to consider. Plus, shocking is overrated now. Been there, done that. How about hot sauce? Let's instead talk about hot sauce. It can definitely be used as a measurement to inflict pain. The measurement in this case would be the amount of hot sauce given to another, especially if they do not enjoy the sauce or any kind of spicy foods to begin with. There have been many incidents where it has been used as a weapon against another. In study 1, there were 38 males and 36 female psychology students at the University of Arizona. They were pre-tested on identifying whether or not they had conservative or liberal political views. They either rated extremely conservative to extremely liberal. Study 1 consisted of two different bogus studies. In bogus study 1, they looked at the relationship between personality traits and how people form impressions of others. They were then to write a short story explaining political views, and they would exchange essays with another. Afterwards, they answered a questionnaire with 2 manipulations. They evaluated the essay of another, and based on what they got, they had to answer what they assumed about the person: the college major, sex, age, and what part of the country they were from. In Bogus Study 2, they looked at the relationship between personality and food preferences. Participants had to administer food samples to each other. Participants had to then choose how much hot sauce would be administered to another. They had to fill out a checklist and write the total amount of spoons of hot sauce given at the end. They were then asked what food they had and the type of food that they'd given the target. Participants primarily rated everything. At the end of Study 1, the findings were participants in all conditions were well aware of the dislike in hot sauce, which made a really big effect. MS participants allocated more hot sauce to the author of the worldview essay, and the type of essay had no actual effect, just the idea that their views were threatened. Similar to Study 1, Study 2 had 27 males and 31 females from the University of Arizona, also psych students. They were, however, put into one of 3 conditions. They were either administered the hot sauce before reading the essay, they were MS evaluate first, so they evaluated Express's attitudes before the hot sauce, or in the control condition, where they would write an essay about dental pain and then administer hot sauce. So a really good comparison where it's something that doesn't really have anything to do with expression, more along the lines of a neutral essay, and from there they could administer the hot sauce, versus the other 2, they actually had to either administer the hot sauce beforehand and then read an essay, or express their attitudes about the person before the hot sauce. So just like in Study 1, the Study 2 findings were slightly different. Participants were well aware of the hot sauce dislike across all boards. The allocating of the hot sauce in the condition with the dental essay was actually not significant like the other 2 conditions. There was less aggression evident towards individuals if they were able to evaluate the participant beforehand, as opposed to being able to administer the hot sauce beforehand. So overall, in the 3 conditions, we do see more aggression available whether they administer the hot sauce first or afterwards, versus the dental essay that was actually administered and then giving the hot sauce. Overall, between evaluating the person first versus evaluating them last, there was definitely less aggression. Study 3 consisted of 17 males and 25 females from the same university. It was identical to Study 2, but the biggest differences were that instead they wrote an essay about the direction that the world was heading in, as opposed to just a dental essay. Afterwards, they were also given an essay that was designed to derogate the USA. So Study 3 is actually a replication of Study 2, like mentioned earlier. Because of this, the findings in Study 3 were actually fairly significant to what Study 2 actually looked at. In my personal opinion and the way that I actually interpret everything, I don't see that there is any difference. They're just measuring it differently. Within ANOVA, it looks like. So the findings were actually completely the same. Study 4 involved 16 males and 44 females. They were identical to Study 1, but the biggest difference was instead of a worldview essay, they used a neutral essay speaking on recreational interests, and they instead used juice to be administered by another person. The juice had an effect on whether they would be less interested in taking taste preferences into account from another person. The bad juice allocated for more hot sauce than those who received the neutral juice. So overall, it's really hard to say whether or not it was a predisposition for the views of another person, or if it was more based on the idea that they were wronged in this case. So that's where a majority of the actual retaliation came from, as far as the administered amount of hot sauce given. So overall, the 4 studies show that the MS can actually lead to aggression against those who threaten one's worldview. But even with the findings across all 4 studies, it is still difficult to determine whether or not there is causal evidence between fear of death in relation to aggression, and how much the mortality salience and terror management theory actually come into play with how evil it really is, and where our subconscious actually resides as far as what it is exactly that we would be doing in retaliation. And that's my presentation.